What is up, everybody, and welcome to the All-NBA show powered by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com/All-NBA. Legler is off today. He was calling the game last night that we're going to be talking about, the Lakers and Luka Doncic's debut. But we're also talking about the Blazers because they've been on a run. And I picked the perfect time to bring in my guy, Sean Highkin, because they are on a run and they got their butts kicked last night. But he is Sean Highkin, Rose Garden Report Substack, and a Blazers insider for Rip City Radio. He's also in town because we're doing this back-to-back games in Denver, which the NBA loves to do today. So perfect day to have you on. How you doing?
I'm good. This is my first time seeing this studio in person. I think I've been on the DNVR show like virtually, and I've been on the CHGO. Shout out to CHGO, the All City family. I've been on their show. I've been in their studio, but this is my first time on the All NBA show, and I'm a big fan of the show, so this is exciting.
You haven't seen the bar yet, though. Like, you saw it through the glass.
We can't do the bar before we get on the air. I mean, I know this is like a casual vibe, but that's...
We're going to get into the Blazers, though. That game last night, I mean, it was very interesting for me personally on a Nuggets standpoint.
It was interesting.
But we've talked Nuggets a lot on this show, so we'll go light on Nuggets. I want to go deep on Blazers. That'll actually be a majority of the show, but... we do have to get to our top headline today, whether you like it or not, which is Luka Doncic's debut with the Los Angeles Lakers. They get a very easy win against the tanking Utah Jazz, 132-113. It was never close, 37-25 in the first quarter. The Lakers outscored them 35-22. Basically, this first and second quarter were mirror images of each other. And Luka Doncic goes for 14 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 5 of 14 shooting in just 24 minutes. Kind of wild that he only needed 24 minutes in this one. Highly anticipated, a lot of pomp and circumstance, a lot of theatrics. What's your sort of big takeaway from what you saw last night?
I'm not surprised that, first of all, it was a smart idea for them to have his debut be against a team that there was no chance that they weren't going to beat.
Good call.
I've seen the Jazz, and to be fair, the Blazers lost to the Jazz by 40 this season, but I've seen... obviously, given where the Blazers are in their season or where they were, I pay a lot of attention to the Jazz because that's one of the teams at the beginning of the season that was kind of in competition with them for the lottery standings. And the Jazz understand the assignment the way that almost no other team understands the assignment. So there was never a chance the Lakers were going to lose this game. So it was smart of them to pick Luka's debut to be there. But I'm also not that surprised that you look at his stat line and it wasn't that impressive because he's been out for a while with an injury. And so they needed to kind of ease him back in. And so, his numbers aren't going to look crazy, but I mean, he's going to be fine. I'm not worried about him at all.
Well, obviously he's going to be fine. And I agree with you. This was almost a tune-up, right? For things to come. And then you get the All-Star break. So I think they have one more game and then they'll have the All-Star break. So
and Luka's not going to be at All-Star because he didn't make the team this year because he had missed so much time with an injury. So
if you're Luka, do you take a vacation? Are you working out at the facility? He's been out for so long.
I don't know. I mean, maybe you take a vacation. Maybe he comes back and he's dropped however many pounds the Mavericks would have felt, the exact number of pounds the Mavericks would have felt comfortable with him being at. Yeah. Just to send a message.
It's probably going to happen, by the way. I do think it's going to be a very motivated Luka.
Stuff like that works out for the Lakers.
It always does. I thought the theatrics around it were great. Sure. Obviously the Luka jerseys around the arena kind of set the tone. It's interesting to contrast it to the Dallas one because obviously you have the protests outside. Yeah. And I thought the energy inside the Dallas arena was phenomenal. I thought Anthony Davis did a great job of setting the tone early on in that game of hey man, I know everybody's upset, but I'm here and I'm going to give you my all. Yeah. Obviously it went the way that it went. But the theatrics around last night felt big and the game to me felt small. Luka, obviously, it's highly publicized. LeBron said, hey, man, do you want to go last? It's your call. And he said, I'll go last this one time. You can go last every other time of being called out. And I know this is silly, but between that, knowing that conversation took place, and then also watching how the game played, my biggest note from this was, it's just game one. This is going to be an evolving story. But I think out of the gate and for an indefinite period of time, this is still going to look and feel more like LeBron's team than Luka's. That's at least my takeaway from this one. And I'm not saying that in a way that's confrontational, but I just think naturally LeBron has been there. He knows the team. He knows the ropes. He knows the city. And Luka to me felt like a guy that was trying to figure out, the ball started in LeBron's hands a lot. And Luka obviously made plays. But watching last night's game, at least, that's my only question I have from this meaningless game was, Luka looks to me like a guy that's going to be in an uncomfortable spot of how do I take control of this team? Do I take control of it? And how do I make that dynamic comfortable? It worked last night, But that was at least my note, is this felt like LeBron bringing in Luka, not Luka taking over the Lakers.
Well, but hadn't they been positioning it for years as eventually the Lakers are going to be Anthony Davis's team, not LeBron's? Yeah. And then it never really happened. I mean, the thing with that, and this is kind of a silly thing, but like, obviously at this exact moment in time, Luka at 25 is a better basketball player than LeBron at 40. Like, obviously. LeBron is still probably one of the 10 most famous people in America, like sports or otherwise.
He's also playing great lately, though.
He is.
So
I mean, and LeBron is kind of at the point.
He's not that
now.
Far down the list.
No, but he's at the point now where like LeBron is going to look like vintage LeBron, like 1 out of every 3 games, because that's just where he is at his age and you know, all of that. But because LeBron is such a, you know, he's a celebrity bigger than any you can like have never watched a basketball game in your life. You probably know a lot about LeBron James. So any team that he's on, as long as he's still playing, is going to be his team because of him being who he is. He's kind of in that realm. But the Lakers also, like, I'm not too worried about is this LeBron's team? Is this Luka's team? Because the Lakers did not make this. I mean, the calculus for them is a little bit different than the calculus for Dallas. The Dallas, I mean, for wherever you want to land on whether they should have done this trade or not, clearly what Nico Harrison wanted to do was pair Anthony Davis with Kyrie Irving. Those guys are both in their 30s and have had a lot of injury problems. So you know that they made that trade for, you know, the next 2 to 3 years at most, and that's their window, and then they're going to figure it out from there. The Lakers trade for Luka at 25. LeBron has probably, I don't know how many more years LeBron has left, but, you know, 1 or 2 more after this, probably it.
I mean, who knows, man? Maybe yes, 10.
I could say that, and it could be like a Tom Brady thing where he plays until he's 45 or whatever. But like, the Lakers made this trade to have Luka be the face of the franchise for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So if it's a little bit awkward at first of all, the Lakers are even with LeBron and Luka, I don't think the Lakers this season are gonna be up there with like the Oklahoma City tier of like contenders in the West. They're probably, you know, best case scenario, everybody stays healthy, they're probably like a 2nd round team in the West. So I don't know. I mean, so they didn't make this trade for this year, which is why I'm okay with it being a little bit awkward this year, because this isn't like we cashed in all this stuff to get Luka. We have to win this year or the whole thing is going to explode. They did that as like a succession plan for LeBron for the long term.
But I don't mean this more in the like who's the name on the marquee thing or this or that. I really mean it from a stylistic standpoint, because as much as you're right about Anthony Davis, even if he was going to overtake LeBron at some point, he's still a big man. The ball's still going to be in LeBron's hands more. And I think this is why I think it's an interesting question. Did we lose our camera? You guys can still hear us, but our camera might have overheated. But it's important to me because both guys play the same style and both guys have the ball in their hand. And that to me is why this is, somebody has to, it's more to me like LeBron, Dwayne Wade, where it's like, okay, somebody is going to have to alter their game. And to be perfectly fair to last night, it's clear that Luka doesn't know all the terminology, all the plays, everything else. He's barely been there. I don't even know if they've had a practice with him, you know, leading into this game. So of course you're going to rely on the guy who does know all the terminology, does know all the plays. But I still look at this long term and I go, the ideal situation is where both guys are 100% of themselves. That's so hard. There's almost somebody that has to be like, okay, we both can do this thing, but you get to because you're the guy. And that's all I mean is that LeBron, he has a personality that's different than Luka's in this one way of like, he has the like, he's always been the guy. And I just am so, even watching last night, I was like, man, LeBron is running this team. And Luka had his moments, but LeBron is running this team. And I'm just very curious to see over the next month how much that evolves. Does it evolve to where it's perfectly even, or does it always going to be a little uncomfortable between them?
Well, kind of to your point about the LeBron Wade thing from when they were in Miami together, I kind of think it's really going to click for them next season. Because remember the first year of the LeBron Wade Miami thing, it was a little awkward, and they were kind of figuring out, you know, who's going to be the guy. Is it they were doing a whole lot of like your turn, my turn stuff, and I think they started that season 9-8 after all the hype of the decision and the big three and all that stuff. And it took them basically that full first season to figure it out. Now it's a lot harder to figure it out in February with the trade happening mid-season than, at least with the LeBron Wade thing. They had a training camp, they had a whole season to kind of figure it out. But even if it's not a perfect thing now, I think it's going to be one of those things where like they work the kinks out this year and then they go into next season and it's going to be a lot smoother than maybe it is right now.
Here's my second big take from that game. Obviously the trade gets rescinded, although even that is in dispute. Maybe we'll talk about that in a second. Maybe the rescension is rescinded. I don't know what'll happen. But
it's a double reverse swap.
A double reverse swap. Jaxon Hayes is going to be a huge beneficiary of this. I'm still not a big fan or believer that he's going to be like a playoff piece that can battle with all the different bigs that he's going to have to go against. But he was 6 of 6, and they were very easy shots he got. Especially right off the bat, it was like bang, bang, right in a row. Here's a lob from LeBron, here's a lob from Luka, and you're like, oh yeah, he's going to be open a lot on those plays. So I think he's going to look really good over the coming months. But their best lineup to me is it's going to be small ball, and the question is going to be how good and how potent can that small ball lineup be. And if you just swap Jaxon Hayes for Dorian Finney-Smith, that's where you get really, really small. Is Rui Hachimura your center effectively, because you don't want LeBron playing there too much. In the playoffs, I do think in a Game 7, LeBron might be your backup center. He's really, really good in 30 minutes, in one game. But to me, that's the thing that when you watch it, you go, they can really space you out. Almost like a giant version of, and people are going to hate me for saying this, like a giant version of the Celtics, where the Celtics can play 5 guys out, guard-to-guard action, and you just have everybody's just trying to drive and kick and drive and kick. And they had moments of that in that game where you watch it and you go, I don't know if this year's enough runway, but I could see a long-term situation where the Lakers actually benefit from saying we have LeBron, we have Luka, and we have a bunch of guys that are interchangeable. Austin Reeves, by the way, I want to put him in this conversation too, because he's a great creator in this environment. But you have those 3 guys, and you say, hey, this actually works. Maybe our identity looks more like the Celtics, where we just play 5 out and we have to get a big center for certain matchups. But our best punch is we can spread you out like this, and no one can stay in front of both Luka and LeBron at the same time. And at least even last night in their first game, yes, it was the Jazz, but at least that vision I can see.
I still think this summer they're probably going to prioritize bringing in a little bit of an upgrade at the center position, which, they thought they were doing with Mark Williams before that trade got called back. Like, Jaxon Hayes really is their only center right now.
Yeah,
that's tough.
They had the 2 ways like that. Yeah,
yeah, that's I don't know how that's going to hold up in the playoffs. But like, there's always guys. I mean, you saw like just how much better Daniel Gafford looked playing next to Luka in Dallas than he did in Washington, or you saw like how good Derek Lively was his rookie season. So like, those types of guys, and whoever's on I don't have the list of free agents this summer in front of me, but there's going to be a couple of centers like that who may be willing to sign for a little bit less to play for the Lakers, which usually happens, but B, because any of those guys are like, if I go play with LeBron and Luka, I can look like an all-star, and then I can get another big contract. Like, they're gonna figure that stuff out. They're gonna get that part of it figured out, but that's going to be kind of the main thing they're going to have to get figured out, because if Jaxon Hayes is kind of your only real center going into a playoff matchup, that's tough.
And I just wonder what those types of guys will be like. Is it something you spend money on a guy, and say, okay, we're a big 3 of sorts, right?
Sure.
You're going to have a big 2, but maybe that's, we're counting on this guy to be the 3rd best player. Or do you spend it on a collection of bigs because you believe that you can get 3 Daniel Gaffords? And it's like they're all going to look great, and now we just have a stable of them, which is all we need, and we can use our resources elsewhere. I personally think it might be the latter because, like I said, I'm just so intrigued by this idea of being able to play 5 out. And if you go up against your bigs in the West, like, okay, you're going to have Dallas, you're going to have Denver, you're going to have Minnesota. There is a thing of, okay, can we build a team that's going to stop those bigs? Maybe not. But you know what makes those bigs uncomfortable? When you have a successful 5-out offense that you can use. And the more I think about it, the more I wonder if that's actually how this whole thing shakes out, is them trying to build a 5-out lineup and then have a backup option or a side option that creates a big. So Jaxon Hayes is a big winner. I think Austin Reeves might be a big winner of this too. I mean, he was great last night. He was a game high plus 27 at 22 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal, and a block, 6 of 10 from the field. His shots were always easy, with LeBron and AD. I think they might actually be easier here because he is going to get the 3rd worst perimeter defender, and he's going to be able to start a lot of possessions from a position of advantage. Like, okay, the defense is scrambling, and now I do what I do. And you saw that last night. I think Jaxon Hayes and Austin Reeves, to me, might be the 2 biggest beneficiaries of the current setup of the Lakers.
Well, the real big winner, if you're, assuming the other trade stays rescinded and doesn't get challenged or whatever, the real big winner is Dalton Connect, because he gets to be talked about as an all-star for the rest of his career again for being on the Lakers.
DNP personal last night, obviously coming back. I don't know, man. Our guy Legs was talking about the difficulty of a team trading you, and then there's the Lakers media machine comes out with some of the quietly they weren't sure about his toughness and about this and that. And I think that is actually a hard part. As much as I love Dalton Connect, he's from my hometown, Thornton, Colorado. Shout out Thornton. Best player to ever come out of Thornton. As much as I love and I'm rooting for him, there is a level of, one, you need to have a great IQ now. Like if you're a rookie, it's going to be tough because you're not going to get the long runway you would have gotten previously. And two, when people start saying like there are certain traits you just have to bring, and I do wonder if he's a guy that if they tried to trade you once, I would go into the summer with my eyes open of like, I don't know if I'm long here
for both of the guys in that trade, because
yeah,
I
Mark
mean
Williams too.
what I loved is the press release that the press release was doing way too much that the Hornets put out there.
You thought?
We were so reluctant to trade Mark Williams, but we're so excited to welcome him back. And then by the way, now Shams is reporting that they're challenging the trade getting rescinded, so like they must not really want him back.
Yeah,
like it's
a little weird. I thought it was an interesting debut. I'm more interested for the post All-Star portion of this. Right. But the two things I take away from it, one are the balance between LeBron and Luka is going to be interesting. They might nail it. I mean, honestly, they're two of the smartest players. I'm a big believer in you put together IQ and passing and you can fix a lot of shortcomings. And they have two guys that are phenomenal at that. And then number two, the small ball stuff is to me very intriguing. And I would not be surprised if the Lakers are able to, I mean, 8 weeks left in the season. It's kind of a tough runway. I don't know if they'll get it done then. But I wouldn't be surprised if their takeaway from the end of the season, however it goes, is, you know what? Let's get a couple centers that are just guys because our real punch is going to be a death lineup where we get to go to 5 out and we're just going to we're going to have a 140 offensive rating every single time because nobody can guard that much spacing and dribble drive creation.
For the next couple of years, yeah. And then if they have to figure it out and readjust it once LeBron is out of the picture, then...
Last one, you said you had a take on the Mark Williams thing, so this is interesting.
That was honestly what I just said about how funny it was with the thing. That was kind of my take on it.
Because we're in a bit of uncharted territory. It's very rare for a trade to get rescinded.
Yeah.
But then it's even more rare for that rescinded trade to get contested.
I can't remember a time that's ever happened.
Is there a chance? I mean, you have seen some like, team makes a regret or, we get the medicals and this or that. Like we have seen this, but to contest it now, it would be the weirdest thing if this trade ends up being forced to go through because it's like, no, you're rescinding it on false pretenses.
And then both guys come back, or, go into being like, oh, well, the team that traded, like Dalton Connect going back and being like, well, I did end up here, but like they traded me and then they didn't want me. And then like Mark Williams, like, I don't know what's more awkward, like going back to a team that traded you or having to go through with the trade anyway, knowing that the trade was rescinded and then the other team tried to like, and I guess the way you spin it, if you're Charlotte is, we wanted you so bad, Dalton Connect, that we were willing to go to court to make sure that we got you.
That's a good one. I think that's how you spin it.
That's how, like, I thought that last press release was kind of tough for Charlotte. That's how you finesse it if you end up being able to.
It would also be funny if it was Mark Williams. It's almost the opposite. If the trade does get forced through,
it's like, oh, well, you guys wanted me and then you didn't want me, and now I'm here. How's that going to go? Because isn't he up for an extension this summer?
I think he is. So that'll be interesting. By the way, Tim Legler was on the call for this one. It's the reason he couldn't be on the show today, but he is back tomorrow. I'm sure we're going to be going over that one as well as the Dallas side of this trade because last night Gafford goes down too. I feel for Dallas fans.
Yeah.
I feel for Dallas Mavericks fans because this is just the darkest timeline so far. So Tim Legs will be here tomorrow. We'll break down both of these two games and teams in a little bit more detail. Let's take a break because Sean Highkin has been covering the Blazers. And the Blazers, to everyone's surprise, went on a nice win streak up until last night. We're going to talk about that on the other side.
All right, we off?
When the game tips off, the NBA action is just beginning on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because FanDuel is your home for NBA live betting. So even if you missed the first few minutes of the game or want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can make your picks from the first whistle till the final buzzer. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. However you want to play, now is the perfect time to join. New FanDuel customers get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/AllNBA to join today. That's FanDuel.com/ALLNBA. Use our code for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Must be 21 or older and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in D.C. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts or 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Also want to tell you guys about Shady Rays. Get ready for the season ahead with quality shades built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered with premium polarized shades that won't break the bank. Shady Rays is an independent sunglass company. You know I like that. Offering a world-class product rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Their shades have durable frames and crystal clear optics, making them the perfect choice for all outdoor adventures, including if you guys are like fishermen, fly fishermen, or if you're skiers, snowboarders, something like that, they have shades for every type of outdoor adventure. Plus, they probably have a style in your team's favorite colors. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out their best deal of the season. Head to shadyrays.com and use our code AC35 for 35% off of polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Segment 2 of the All NBA show. And I want to remind you guys, we have our playback going tonight. This is going to be incredible. We've already got like a couple hundred people signed up for this. I think it's going to be big. Playback.tv/All NBA show. Our first time doing a second screen watch along. You want to go to that code right there, or that site right there, playback.tv/All NBA show, and sign up. You have a chance to win League Pass. We're going to be handing out codes for League Pass. And even if you don't win, there is a 7-day free trial where you can get League Pass for 7 days for free just from going there and signing up. Go there now so you'll get an alert when we go live tonight at, is it 8 p.m. Eastern time? 6 p.m. Mountain time. So 8 p.m., 8 to 10 Eastern time, we're going to be there just second screening it, pointing out what we see on the games. Legler giving his play-by-play, so to speak. It should be pretty good. All right, let's talk a little Blazers. We got Sean Highkin here. And the Blazers are 23-31. Not long ago, they had one of the worst records in the NBA, but they decided we're not tanking. We have some stuff cooking right now. They made a lineup change and put Deni Avdija, who I've always liked. They put him into the starting lineup for Shaedon Sharpe, and they've gone on a run since. Is it as simple as that? And what else is going on that has made them have this? It's now 10 of 13, I believe. They've won 10 of their last 13. But what is it that has had them turn around their season?
Well, part of it, I think, is the lineup change, and I think it's oversimplifying it to say they put Deni Avdija in for Shaedon Sharpe, because there was a lot of different like fluctuations where guys were in and out, but you know, Shaedon, since he came back from the shoulder injury that he missed the first part of the season with, had been starting, and that was just kind of because he is one of the guys that, you know, was one of their lottery picks and is somebody that they're like long term still feel like is going to be a core piece of this thing.
Was he the brightest spot of last season?
No, because he didn't play. He only played 32 games last season because he had the core injury.
Okay.
He missed most of the season he had a surgery for that. But and this is also kind of to a credit.
Reith was a bright spot too.
This is also kind of to a credit to Chauncey Billups, is that Billups and this is some, you know, the Chauncey thing has been kind of an interesting subplot to watch the whole season, because he's going into the final. He's currently in the final year of his contract, and kind of most people have just assumed that they're going to just run out this year of his contract and then, you know, go their separate ways. Chauncey could have just completely checked out then, but he decided, like, no, I'm going to actually, you know, make a real adjustment and try to, you know, help Shaedon in his career. And basically, he sat Shaedon down before. This was a game, I think it was the 19th against the Bulls was the first game of this run. He sat Shaedon down and said, look, you haven't been bringing it defensively. I'm moving you to the bench. And not only did he tell him that, he told us that he told him that before the game. Like, he didn't sit. We asked him why Shaedon wasn't starting. He could have just kind of protected him and said, like, oh, no, this is just a matchup thing. You know, it's not anything. But no, he said it was because he felt like Shaedon hadn't been good enough defensively. And to Shaedon's credit, he's been playing really well on this whole run. He could have said, oh, well, screw this. I don't like this. I'm getting benched, and then just kind of checked out. But
this is a big deal, though, Sean, because in my opinion, it's the toughest thing a coach has to do is be honest with his players and get them to buy in. And like, look, Chauncey's a Colorado guy. He's from right down the street right here by the DMV bar.
Got quite an introduction last night.
We love him here. Yeah. We love Chauncey. And the one thing I'll say about him, not knowing him personally, is he is known as a great leader and an extremely charismatic person. We obviously had him here in Denver, the Nuggets run. very charismatic. And when I hear that, it's exactly like when he got hired for the job, I would say, you know what? I think players are going to love him, and I think he's going to be able to be honest with players. So when I hear that, even in a guy who's could be viewed as a dead man walking, to me, I go, that's not an underrated trait.
No, and he's been really good with Scoot too in terms of like he. There are a lot of fans that are like really upset that Scoot isn't playing enough minutes or Scoot isn't starting, but it's kind of the same. And, you look at kind of the way Chauncey's career started. He was a third overall pick. And, later in his career, he became an all-star and a finals MVP and a Hall of Famer and all of that. But he was traded 5 times in his first 5 seasons. Like he doesn't, his career, he was also a high draft pick and his career started off kind of rough. And so he's been able to kind of help Scoot along and be like, look, it's not going to be perfect, right? But and you talk to every single one of these players, and this is the thing I tell fans about, like, because people have been wanting Chauncey fired basically from the day he took the job for basketball reasons and not the whole the stuff with Neil and all that. But I have never heard of one of his players not buying into him or responding to him or being willing to listen to what he's saying, because I think because he is who he is as a player and he has the status that he has in the league and with players, like he has the ability to, either he doesn't rip guys publicly that often now. He did a lot in his first year because he didn't really fully understand that part of the job as a head coach, is you're not supposed to do that. But he can sit down with somebody like Shaedon Sharpe and say, hey, you're not bringing it defensively. I'm taking you out of the starting lineup. And Shaedon can say, because Chauncey, if Chauncey was, if he was like a first-time head coach who was just some assistant that was like getting a job for the first time, probably doesn't have the juice to be able to do that with somebody like Shaedon, who's, been a high draft pick and heavily hyped like his whole life.
Right.
When it's Chauncey Billups, players listen to it.
Yeah. And the Scoot thing even is so interesting, what you said there, because I do think that getting the keys to a franchise early on is a blessing for some players and a curse for others.
Yeah.
And depending on what type of player you are, I mean, Jokic came off the bench, right? And it was great for him. You think about it, he's the best player in the world, one of the best players of all time.
Jokic is a little bit of a different thing, though, because he was a second-round pick. Nobody came into 100%. This thinking, like, this is going to be a friend. He was not drafted third overall to replace Damian Lillard.
100%. But, okay, we'll use Anthony Bennett maybe in the opposite direction, who we knew was a down draft, and you take him, and it's like, well, we got to build around him. And it might have just been better if it was, hey, man, yes, you're a top pick, but we got to go through the stages of everything so we build this thing the right way, and the curve can be accelerated. That's why Chauncey is actually a perfect person for this. He came out to be a finals MVP. In my opinion, one of the best point guards of all time. I mean, this is the era of point guards, so most of your best ones have come in the last 10, 15 years. But when Chauncey retired, he was probably a top 15 point guard of all time in most people's books. And that's a guy that came in, like you said, the hard way and was able to build a foundation. And Scoot Henderson, to me, fits that mold. He's playing, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know what it's been the last 2 or 3 games, but he was playing some of the best basketball of his career very recently. And to me, that's where a player gets real confidence, an opportunity to kind of build things. And then when it comes together, it's a steep curve where it's like, there it is. Now you're taking off and there's no turbulence.
With Scoot at this point, it's really basically been since the new calendar year started. So since January, so at this point, it's been like a full 6 weeks of him. Like he's had a couple of bad games here and there during this run, but for the most part, it's been like 6 weeks now of him being legitimately good. And so at this point, I still don't know if Scoot's like a franchise guy and like all the stuff that he was kind of hyped up to be when they drafted him third overall and basically pushed Dame out in order to bring him in. But I think he's definitely shown enough that I think he can be, at the worst, a quality starter. I don't know about all-star. Like, it's still kind of a small sample size to say, what he's been doing the last 6 weeks is just what he is. But I think he's like shown enough that like I think he can be a good starter as a point guard. And the thing about him is, you look at the the numbers are going to show that like he's shooting really well.
Yeah, that's part of it. He was shooting red hot.
Even if that comes down a little, like I think he's shooting like over 40% from 3 in this hot stretch, which was never one of his strengths coming. Now maybe he has just completely fixed his 3-point shot and he's just Steph Curry now. And that's if that happens, then that changes some things for the Blazers going forward. I don't think that's going to happen. But even if he's just like long term is like a league average 35-36% 3-point shooter, everything else has gotten so much better. Like the turnovers are way down. The defense, I think, has gotten a lot. Like he always physically has had the tools to be a good defender and
the motor.
Yeah, and no, and that's the other thing about Scoot is like whatever his ceiling is, like he's a guy that like I've gotten to know him quite well over the last year and a half since he's been in Portland. he works. He's a good teammate. He cares about the right things. He has a positive attitude about everything, even while he's been struggling. Everybody really likes him. And again, he puts the work in. He's gonna whatever his ceiling ends up being. I think he's going to reach it because he's going to put the work in.
Yeah. What is his strengths then? Now that you're seeing him to kind of develop, what do you project his biggest strengths to be?
Well, he's great at getting to the rim. The finishing is still, if you look at his finishing numbers, it's still a little bit probably not where it should be, but he's great at, he finishes through contact and he kind of embraces contact. Like and he gets to the free throw line a lot.
Westbrook-esque.
Kind of. Well, he's not the athlete that prime Westbrook was because nobody is. But like Westbrook is like a one of one all time like outlier. But he kind of has that same mentality. He's become a lot better as a playmaker. I think the defense just because of what he can do physically and the way that he's built, like I don't know what his numbers are at this point on that end, but like he does, he can get up into guys like physically, and I think he's gotten a lot more consistent at that over the last 6 weeks or so. But no, this has been a very because part of I think why the last year plus for the Blazers has kind of looked so bleak was because of what Scoot was hyped up to be, especially after they traded Dame kind of as a result of drafting him, and then the way that his rookie season and the first part of his second season ended up being, because, teams miss on draft picks all the time. If you whiff on the third overall pick that was brought in specifically to replace your franchise's all-time leading scorer and drafting him basically led to that guy requesting a trade, if you miss on that guy and that guy ends up like not being even a starter level player in the NBA, that's tough.
Yeah.
But if, what Scoot's done the last 6 weeks, if that's kind of more the baseline of where he is now, where now he is actually a good starter and, you aren't seeing people really throw around the bust stuff or, whatever. You're not really seeing any of that anymore. If Scoot comes around, I think that changes some things about this team's ceiling more so than, whatever. And that's part of also why I don't think a lot of fans in Portland, and obviously I see a lot of like what fans are saying, and there are going to be some, during this little run that they've been on who are like mad that they're winning too much and it's going to hurt their chances of getting Cooper flag. If they're winning these games because Scoot and Shaedon and like Toumani Camara and Deni Avdija and some of these young guys, if they win some of these games because those guys are playing well, those are the guys that you want to become good long-term whenever you do get whoever your foundational number one guy is, which I don't think they have right now. But those guys learning kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, those guys learning how to be winners instead of just playing all these games that they're expected to lose and just, trying to develop individually while the team is trying to get a higher lottery pick. I think that's worth a couple of lottery percentage points.
Well, I want to ask you about a couple guys who I think fit this, the like learning how to win and pushing forward. And the first guy for me is Toumani Camara.
Yeah.
Very interested in him. I was so excited to watch him last night. I don't think he had a very noteworthy game. No. So hopefully on Wednesday I'll get a better look at him. But he's been incredible this year. I know the team is excited about him. Break his game down for me. What is it that's exciting about him?
He will just guard anybody. He'll just he's one of these I kind of think the last one of these guys that the Blazers had is, and he's a bigger guy than Wesley Matthews, but Wesley Matthews just kind of that, you can put him on whoever. Yeah. He's kind of, this is one of these guys like every single team in the league needs a guy like that who we were talking about LeBron or Luka earlier with the Lakers stuff. Toumani Camara is going to get excited about being given that assignment, and he's going to, annoy those guys, pick them up. I'm actually kind of excited for, I thought this new All-Star format was kind of dumb until Toumani got picked for Rising Stars, because now it's now I kind of want to see like Anthony Edwards or SGA or whoever.
You're right.
Playing in, if Toumani's team makes it to the,
because he has a point. Like all these other guys are out there just to go not get hurt, have fun. But a guy like Toumani is like, hey man,
I'm gonna pick you up full court in this All-Star game. These other guys are getting, Toumani's interesting because his offense has started to come around a little bit more lately. Like he started to get a little bit more consistent shooting the three. But when he was playing, when he was like in the rotation last year, he was kind of a defense-only guy, and whatever you got from him on offense is a bonus. Yeah. That's starting to not be the case anymore. He's starting to kind of develop some things in his game on that end. Like he's, the playmaking has gotten a little bit better. His shooting has definitely gotten more consistent, and he's become more willing to take those shots. So if he becomes a legitimate 3-and-D guy, I don't want to say that he is that now, because, you want to see a little bit more before you know that like the shooting is really like a consistent and an improved thing. But I mean, Yeah, he has been the Blazers' best player this season. Full stop.
So you know what I think about this? Shooting is the simplest way to make up for a bunch of weaknesses.
Right.
But I think it's overstated as a necessity. And what I mean by that is, from what I've seen of him, and I'll be honest with you, I haven't seen a ton, but what I have seen of him, I think he understands how to read the court as a cutter well. And that is a skill that I think people don't really understand the value of it. When you have good passers, and I'm not sure they have enough of these, but there's enough teams around there that are building with multiple passers and playmakers, guys who can screen off ball, read the court, and be able to understand cutting lanes, when to cut, cutting timing. That can be that can create as much gravity as a standstill shooter, because motion makes the defense think. And when guys read properly where the rotations are, where the cutting angles are, you can just open things up. And Denver is the best concept of this, right? Christian Brown, okay shooter, shooting really well this year. But what he really is a great cutter. And when you have Jokic, it's like he's a quarterback and you're sending a guy across the middle. The safety has to react, the linebacker, everybody has to react now.
Yeah.
And even if you don't throw to him. And so I think that he's a guy that, look, the shooting would be nice. The defense is incredible. But as a cutter, there's something you can do with that, especially an athlete, like a guy who's long and athletic, that puts pressure on the rim the same way a diver does on a pick and roll. So I'm into him. Next guy, Donovan Clingan.
Yeah.
Obviously a monster. Goes 8 for 8 last night, although he did get sort of the Jokic treatment. I love when Jokic goes up against these young bigs
So the thing is, Chauncey said after the game last night, he didn't even think Donovan did a bad job on it. It's just
he didn't.
It's just, what is anybody's you look at, it's one of those things where you think, oh, that guy actually did an okay job on Jokic. You stayed in front of him. You look at Jokic's stat line. He had 40 and 7 or whatever he had last night in three quarters.
Missed 4 shots, 5 shots, something like that. Yeah.
Jokic is just one of those guys where it's you can guard him as well as you want, but it just doesn't even matter.
Well, here's what's interesting when we think about tomorrow's game is another thing Chauncey said was, we didn't double. We were gonna. Sometimes you have to see what it looks like to guard one-on-one against the great players, because you got to see where you are.
Yeah.
And I think when you draft a guy like Donovan Clingan, your hope is that over time he's a guy that keeps you from having to double the post. Okay, he's out there against the big, and he has a ways to go there. But he is enormous. I mean, when you watch him, he is a guy that he's 7+. Legs was but Legs was talking about this the other day, that we always say they're 7-footers, but then Williams, for example, is a 7+. He's taller than that. He's a 7+, but he's also pretty flat-footed. He took the 3. I know he's shooting the 3 and this or that.
He's 6 for 22 on the season.
Yeah, there you go. So
they ever since the draft, they've been saying, "Oh no, Donovan Clingan didn't shoot a lot of threes at UConn, but he can shoot the threes." And I'm whenever anybody says that about a guy they draft and they weren't a 3-point shooter in college, I'm just like, oh, all right,
yeah. Okay. But what's the upside for him as far as you see it?
Well, defensively, he's already so far ahead of a lot of guys his age. I mean, you've seen. And again, nobody's going to look good guarding Jokic. Yeah. So he didn't
look great last night.
Last night wouldn't be a great example, but there have been other games where he just will completely shut down the paint. And he's one of those guys. It's not to the extent of a guy like Wemby, but it's kind of in that same zone where if he's out on the floor, teams will not even try to attack because he's too big and he's gonna block them. So I think defensively he's gonna be fine. I don't want to say he's going to be a defensive player of the year guy, because I think Wemby is just going to win that award for the next 10 years or whatever. But Donovan Clingan is going to get all defense votes at some point in his career. That's the level of upside I think he has on that end. The offense is so much further away than that. It's honestly a good comp that I've been kind of kicking around in my head, and this is from about 10 years ago, is when you look at the difference between how good a guy's hands are on defense and how underdeveloped they are on and how underdeveloped they are on offense, and how little he's able to do at this point, is Omer Asik.
Okay.
Remember? Because remember, he was one of the most dominant defensive bigs in the league for that little bit when he was in Chicago and then he was in Houston. But he was also a complete,
But when you say Omer Asik, to me, because I liked him back in the day, but he is such a transitional big.
Yeah.
He was in between the old school and the new, where he almost doesn't live in the new world now. So that's almost a bad comp.
You know what I'm kind of saying though about a guy that's so good defensively and so far away from anything offensively. And Clingan had his best offensive night of his career last night. That 21 points, 8 of 8 shooting. That was a career high for him.
Really?
So he's coming. He might come around on that end. It's he's got to develop, because right now his whole offense is basically just. I mean, and I will say though, on the offensive end, he is a pretty good passer. He's a pretty good playing. They've been using him as a hub a little bit. He does have some skill on that end, but as far as his own scoring, he doesn't have you look at kind of the Blazers' other bigs Robert Williams is like a lob finisher, and he will finish any lob that's around the rim.
Yeah.
DeAndre Ayton has that mid-range game that he can hit those shots. Duop Reith, who doesn't really play much, he's an outside shooter. Donovan Clingan doesn't really have any of those things. So if he can develop one or two things that are like his go-to things on offense that he's effective at, then I think that changes his ceiling a little bit. I think like long-term, I think he can be a starter just because his defense is so good, but the difference between that and like being an all-star, or, being anything more than, just like a good starter is going to depend on how far he comes around on offense and also how much he's able to play. I think the thing people don't realize, and this is also why I don't think they were, super desperate to trade DeAndre Ayton, is because Clingan, conditioning-wise, physically, and you kind of saw this earlier in Jokic's career before he got to be kind of what he is now, or also, back in the day with Nurkic, who, both of us have covered at different points, but some of these bigger guys, just conditioning-wise, can't play more than like 25 to 27 minutes a game long-term. And Clingan right now is at a point where if you play him more than 20,
he's dying out there.
So
what's weird about Jokic, though, is he fits that mold because usually the 7+, this is it. I think it's part of Embiid's problem, honestly, is he's so big that's a huge engine. No matter how good a shape you're in, you're going to wear down.
Zach Edey's kind of an outlier in this way, too.
You're right.
He plays a ton.
But see, and Jokic, the same thing is I think Jokic's as conditioned as anyone in the NBA, and he has been for about 5 years.
Yeah.
But
before those 5 years.
But before those 5 years, I would have said impossible for him to be an elite conditioned guy.
Right.
He'd always could merely be good. And now here's Jokic never getting tired. We got to keep it moving here. So I'm going to go rapid fire. What happened to Duop Reith? Because you just mentioned he doesn't play. I liked him. He was shooting the three. He was doing some stuff. He gave you energy. What happened to him?
They just don't have enough minutes for big men. Somebody's got
numbers game.
Somebody's got to be squeezed out of the rotation.
Why hasn't he moved though? Because I feel like lots of teams are interested in we'll take a flyer on that.
I don't know what specific offers they got. I don't know.
Maybe I'm just too high on him.
No, he is. He does serve. I think defensively,
he serves a purpose. Yeah,
he's a great 3-point shooter for a big man. Defensively, he doesn't really defend, doesn't really rebound. It's just kind of
just gives you a spacer.
Yeah. And I mean, there are teams that could use that, but
yeah. What about Deni Avdija? Core piece?
I think so, and that's why they traded the 2 picks that they traded to get him. And you have to remember, he just turned 24 like a week ago.
Yeah.
So he's still pretty young. He's actually younger than Toumani Camara because Toumani Camara was kind of an older rookie.
Has a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah.
Tough.
Yeah. And, and also, to get into some of the cap stuff, he's on a really, really good contract. Like he's on one of the best non-rookie contracts.
How far does it go out?
It's 3 years after this one. He basically signed like the 4-year basically at the mid-level. It's like 4 years, 50. Or whatever, but
he might be an upside player. I mean, like you're talking about, he's young. He hasn't really gotten the chance to do it on a good team, including now. But I do look at the skill set and think he has something. I do wonder where his usage is right. He reminds me in some ways of a guy where it's like his skill set might lend himself to being a lower usage guy on a good team, but he's going to be a higher usage on the ascension to that point.
But I think they envision him being, a complement. Because the way that this team is set up right now, all of the guys that we've talked about, we talked about Scoot's improvement, we talked about Shaedon, we talked about Avdija, Camara, Clingan. These are all really good, I think, complementary guys. They don't have the guy, though. They don't have their Jokic, their Anthony Edwards, their, Paolo Banchero, whoever you want to throw in there as your guy.
Right.
That's why they came into this season planning on trying to get Cooper Flagg. Now, if they somehow win the lottery and they get Cooper Flagg, then that could be their guy. But whether it's somebody they get in the draft or somebody they trade for, they still need that's the thing they need. They have, because when you look at all of the, the other quote unquote rebuilding teams, you look at, a Charlotte, a Washington, a Utah, these guys have so much more as far as on the roster, proven NBA talent that's also young enough that they can grow together than any of those teams do. And so I think if they do end up getting, whether it's Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, whoever it ends up being in the draft that, ends up being the guy, they're in a much better position than I think any of those other teams would be if they got Cooper Flagg. But it's just they still need the guy, and however they can get the guy.
That's so hard to get, man.
That's the thing. They either need to win the lottery or they need to be like the Lakers and just be given Luka Doncic.
Last one, and then we got to get out of here. But of the other guys, Jabari Walker, Banton, I don't know anything about Rupert, but who are the other guys that you think have the best chance of being one of the pieces, or building towards that?
Well, the 2 guys that I would point to are Rayon Rupert, who you mentioned, he's French,
Rupert,
yeah. Rupert,
gotcha.
yeah. He's kind of a 2 years away from being 2 years away type of guy. He's still pretty young. I don't even think he's 21 yet.
Okay.
But he, long term, they have like they see him. He doesn't really play at all. He plays a lot with the remix. Long term, they see him as like their new Nicholas Batum, and he's like a 3-and-D wing. Like he has that type of they think he has that type of upside, but I think he's like 2 years away from.
Okay, he's one of those. Okay.
He's a very long-term project. The other one, who I think has actually played, pretty good minutes when he's gotten out there, he hasn't always been able to get out there because they kind of have this rotational crunch with some of these veterans that are still there, like Jeremy Grant, whatever. Is Chris Murray, Keegan's brother? He's also just a guy. Like last year it was kind of rough with him because he's good at all the intangible stuff. Like he's a smart defender. He doesn't really make a lot of mistakes when he's on the court. But the shooting was just completely non-existent, and he was in his head about it and all this stuff. That's gotten a little bit more consistent on this, and he doesn't play a ton, but whenever he's out there, I feel like he does positive things now. So I think that's a guy. The guys that we've talked about before, the main guys that we've talked about mostly on here, are I think the main guys that they're like the guys that are like the most integral to kind of what they're building. But if you want me to name a couple of guys that are kind of out of that main part of the rotation, those are the two guys that I think they're the highest on long term.
Well, that's interesting stuff. The Blazers are interesting. I didn't think they were up until about 3-4 weeks ago. And then all of a sudden now I'm looking at it and going, they got a bunch of pieces. But to your point, I think the scariest part and the toughest part to analyze of the team is when they have good pieces but no center.
Right.
And that's the situation they find themselves in. But, you never know how the league unfolds. You never know how the lottery balls bounce.
Maybe the lottery,
hey, I am a big believer in the basketball gods.
Oh, yeah. That's,
they're doing things the right way.
What I'll say is the last 3 years in a row, they did the let's intentionally be embarrassing and unwatchable and just try to game the lottery odds.
And it didn't work.
The kind of the thing I've been telling people is last year they won 21 games and they fell back 3 spots to 7. The year before that, they won 33 games and they moved up to 3. So it's like,
you know what? There you go. We'll see if it works out for the Blazers. Do we have any super chats? All right, what do we got? Oh, Psycho Blue, our guy. He says, B-Ball Cthulhu says the quick succession of injuries to AD and Gaff are the result of the basketball gods passing judgment on the chaos. Something has gone terribly wrong. Look, I'm not going to say the thought didn't cross my mind, but in sensitivity to the people injured, I'm going to go ahead and say,
I don't want to put that on AD.
No, it's not to them.
He didn't ask for any of this.
The gods cursed them for the sins of Nico Harrison and the Mavs.
I hear you, man. That's tough.
It is tough, man. And I think everybody on earth thought the same thing when they saw that, of just how much bad luck can befall a team that was in the single moment they most needed good luck to go their way.
Yeah.
And it sucks, man. Dallas, Denver, I'm always these mid-sized markets I have a special affinity for, and it sucks. Get well soon, AD. Get well soon, Gaff. He is Sean Highkin. You can read him at the Rose Garden Report at Substack, and Blazers Insider for Rip City Radio. My longtime friend, man. Thanks for coming in.
Good to see you, man.
All right, buddy. Legs is back tomorrow, but don't forget tonight. First, go to playback.tv/All-NBA Show. 8 o'clock Eastern. We're going to be on there live taking your mailbag questions, pointing out what we see as we flip channels and watch the various games, and having some guests along. We'll see you then. Hit that like button on the way out.
Silly like the mayor.